one of the silliest things I've seen on TV news and online has been along the lines of, well, you notice that Barack Obama hasn't endorsed her. Chuck Schumer hasn't endorsed her. No, the reason that you've seen these appear as they have is that by individually stepping forward and saying, hi, I'm Chuck Schumer, I'm endorsing Kamala, they get more and more news coverage. If 6 of them all came out in the same hour, they get lost. By doing it this way, they reinforce this image of unity. And there's been very little coverage of the fact that the chairman of all 50 state Democratic parties have said, we're behind Kamala. Yep. So this is, I'll have a piece up at DC Report later today. It's being edited right now. But I hope people will read, because it has some things I'm not going to go into on the show, but that are going to be different, the take on it, than what's going on in the news. But, the polling clearly was showing, in a lot of polling we haven't seen, but what we know in feedback from down ballot politicians and political professionals, that Biden just wasn't cutting it. And most disturbingly, a lot of people, particularly independents, were saying, I'm just going to stay home. I'm not going to vote. Mm-hmm. And so Biden, by stepping back, the last time this happened was on March of 1968, when Lyndon Baines Johnson stepped back. He knew that because he had pursued the Vietnam War, he was not going to get another term. He would have gone down as a really great president in history if he just hadn't listened to the people who said you got to prosecute the war in Vietnam. And so Biden, for the good of the country and the party, is stepping back. And Donald is terrified. And what I'm about to say, I don't mean to insult Kamala Harris in this at all. I do mean to insult Donald. Very shortly after the announcement on Sunday, Donald said he would not be going to the September presidential debate because it wasn't Joe Biden. And my view of that is, well, of course not. Donald's afraid of a girl. And that's how Donald would think about this. To Donald, if you're not white, you're not quite a full person. And none of us are really persons to him. We are objects to be transacted with, either to be blunted or to be used. He tells you, well, I only hire the best people. And then when they come to see who he is, as many of his staff in the White House did, and 40 of his 44 cabinet members, well, they're terrible people. They're just awful people. I had to get rid of them. Well, I'm sorry, why'd you hire them in the first place? And that goes to how everything about Donald is a facade. He's just a con artist. He bluffs his way through things. He's terrified because with Joe Biden in the campaign, the Democrats were drifting. There certainly was no enthusiasm. Biden has turned in the most extraordinary economic performance for the country. America has the best economy in the world by far. No matter how much Donald and J.D. Vance lie about this, jobs created, lower inflation now is below the average since World War II. And yet they're out there saying, oh, prices have tripled and quadrupled. And they have this
ketchup costs more at the grocery store. Yeah.
Yeah, well, things do cost more over time. That's even very low inflation, but the rate has dropped down now to a perfectly manageable 3%. And presidents don't control most of this. The world oil price is not controlled by a president. It's not set by a president. Presidents don't determine if there's tornadoes or hurricanes that knock out crops or interfere with pipelines or other things. But the Democrats are clearly energized. There was a phone call Sunday for black women who are in politics. Some of them are just interested in politics. Some of them are office holders. They expected fewer than 1,000 people to get on the Zoom call. 44,000 black women.
Wow.
44,000.
Wild. Wow.
She raised, according to almost every news report, $81 million in less than 24 hours. According to the New York Daily News, that's wrong. She raised $231 million. That's almost $250 million because a bunch of big money donors have agreed they're going to put up money. J.D. Vance, I just got an email from him a minute ago, in which, well, you're seeing how the liberal billionaires are out there trying to destroy MAGA. And it's not legitimate, of course, for a Democrat to raise money, but a black woman who's half East Indian to raise money like this? I mean, clearly something is wrong. There must be a conspiracy afoot, is the approach that the Trump people are trying to take. Donald is scared, and he has good reason to be. Anybody who's watched, and you can go on the internet and see them, when she was a senator, and she wasn't a senator very long, Kamala Harris questioning Attorney General Bill Barr, a Trump appointee, will see that this is somebody who knows how to go after liars. I mean, she's not quite as good as Katie Porter, but she's really good.
Yeah, she was
will prosecute
exceptional.
the case against Trump.
I like this the kind of mantra of prosecutor versus felon, or one of the things I had the top of my list to talk to you about, which you already have hit really hard, is that Donald Trump seems to be trying to back out of the second presidential debate. But I kind of want to delve into that a little bit more, because one of the things he's doing, he isn't just saying, listen, it's not Joe Biden. I didn't sign on for this. No, thank you. He's throwing all this kind of spaghetti at the wall. Well, ABC is horrible. If this is going to happen, it needs to be on Fox News. And he's coming up with all these excuses, kind of laying the groundwork with, all these piddly excuses for why he can't. And you think it's because he's scared to stand on stage with her? Because he stood on stage with Hillary Clinton, and she was equally as intimidating.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton made some big mistakes when she debated Trump. The most classic was when he started stalking her.
Yep.
And around the stage. And she
oh my
came
God,
off
who does that? So creepy.
Well, many people, her reaction was one of weakness. Yeah. She should have turned around, gone face to face with him and said, your place is over there. It's my turn to speak. And if she had to stand there for the whole rest of the debate, I think she should have stood there. But Kamala knows how to present a case. I mean, she was a standard prosecutor in Alameda County, Oakland, before she was, to the surprise of a lot of people, elected DA. She got elected Attorney General. The Republicans now, the Trump campaign is trying to push the argument that she was tough on people of color and there's something wrong with her. I'm sorry, what? You're saying what? Are they going to go after her because she had an affair when she was in her 20s with Willie Brown in San Francisco? That's kind of hard as a case to make given Donald's behavior. Hypocrisy. But if Donald brought it up in the debate, she'd throw it right back in his face. Mm-hmm. And I think Donald is really deeply troubled because he was coasting along. He wasn't out there campaigning very hard, as he wasn't in 16 or in 20. And now he's facing a formidable challenger. But most importantly, Kamala has excited a lot of people. Yeah. And you can see it in all the internet traffic going back and forth and the money being donated. Independents who are going to sit it out, I think a lot of them are excited about this. And of course, remember, in the primary elections for Donald, about 1 in 5, it varied from state to state, but about 1 in 5 Republicans voted for Nikki Haley or someone else. That is, they voted against Trump. Biden got, I think it was 97% of Republican votes. It was north of 90% of Democratic votes in their primaries. They've also are going to try and cheat. Mike Johnson, the speaker, who is a lawyer from Louisiana, he contends that Kamala can't appear on the ballot in some states. Absolute nonsense. The Democrats haven't nominated anybody yet. She's only the presumptive nominee. I saw another Republican saying, well, she can't have the money that was raised by Joe Biden. I don't know.
They're going to mount a challenge over the money, the legality of the money being hers, right?
All right. But the one thing that Biden, I know what Biden can do for sure. I'm not sure about transferring it to the successor and what the inner rules of that are. We'll find out. But he absolutely can transfer it to the Democratic National Committee, which can then use it as it sees fit on behalf of her campaign and down ballot candidates. And down ballot candidates who were really worried if they were in competitive districts that they were in trouble, I think they now all see opportunity. The Democrats were sort of drifting in the political doldrums because Biden just wasn't connecting with people. He wasn't countering the lies about economic performance and other things. Now they get somebody who, she's going to hammer this and take it home. And Donald knows this, and he's afraid. He's afraid. And remember, Donald likes women who are subservient. He likes a woman, as long as you're subservient to him, that's perfectly cool. You do what he says. You stand there and remember, women who challenge him, he calls them dogs, fat pigs, ugly, things like that. And it was so humiliating for him to lose to a white man that he tried to overthrow our government in 2021. Losing to a black woman? Donald has no capacity to deal with the humiliation of that. And remember, he has repeatedly said that if he doesn't get back to the White House, it's the end of our country. And I interpret that as lightly coded, we're going to try and overthrow the government again. In fact, several Republicans have said that if he doesn't go back to the White House, we will have a civil war. One of the people at the Heritage Foundation said, in essence, we're starting a whole new revolution, and it'll be bloodless as long as the left doesn't oppose us. I'm sorry, you want us to just fall over dead and give you our country?
Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, I have that on my list of things to ask you about too. And what you said there, though, I was going to ask you about what people are saying. Oh, a woman can't win. America's not ready for a woman, let alone a black woman.
Nonsense.
But
Nonsense.
I feel that's too. So let's go right to what happens if she does win, and what happens what do you? We hear this drumbeat for the Civil War. We saw this speaker in Pennsylvania stand up at this rally. A speaker at an Ohio rally, rather, call for a civil war, right? And this isn't the first person to say this. This isn't the first drumbeat of this. This isn't we had Steve Bannon talking about war to the knife or the knife to the whatever. The words and the rhetoric that they're using can be dangerous. And so then what does it look like at the end of this election when Trump goes home the loser?
So we've been in a low-grade civil war since January 6th of 2021. And I wrote that back at the time. Let's not mistake what's going on. There is an effort to overthrow our government. It will fail. If Trump gets back into the White House, it will succeed. But I don't believe at this point Trump is going to get back in the White House. And I think the reason he's running scared is because he knows it's possible he can get there, but no longer likely he will get there. And the reason for all this is very simple. More than 50 years ago, around 1969 or 70, political scientists started warning the Republican Party that you will be a permanent minority party by 2020 if you don't change. The country is going to no longer be heavily white dominated. And California was on the cutting edge of this. It was the first time I remember. I was a reporter at the San Jose Mercury back then. I was a teenager in '68 when I was on the staff. I was a front page staff writer. The phrase majority minority, I think, was the phrase, meaning you're the largest group, but you're still a minority. And that's happened in California. And as a friend of mine said when we were having lunch last month, he said, well, the Republicans can't change because this is who they are. They want white dominance to the extent that they have people of color. Many of them have internalized white dominance or think that it will help them to go along with this. They want to cut off benefits to people who don't have money, whether they're through no fault of their own. They could be somebody like my father, 100% disabled veteran of World War II. What are we spending money on those people for? I remember Donald Trump, by the way, wouldn't meet with some soldiers because they'd had amputations or other disfiguring results from defending our country in the Middle East, and he didn't want to be around them. Had no regard. And so I think the Republicans this is sort of their last hurrah. If the Democrats, now that they're energized, retain control of the White House, retain control of the Senate, and gain control of the House, the Republican Party is going to have to either somehow remake itself, or we're going to see a new and different party emerge. And the people who gave up their principles to bow down to Donald Trump, and that's what they did. Let's not beat around the bush. Nikki Haley, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, a whole slew of these people who were against Trump, J.D. Vance, who called Donald Trump cultural heroin and then compared him to Hitler.
They have America's Hitler. That's right.
Yes, they've all thrown away any sense that they have anything except a rubber spine and are going to bow down to Donald Trump. One hopes that this will be the end of their careers. It may not be, but it should be. And I think those people will end up paying a fairly heavy price for what they've done. Whereas maybe the only two really principled Republicans in all of this were Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who got voted out in primaries. Mitt Romney has proven to be milquetoast. I mean, he'll sometimes say the right things. He voted for conviction in the second impeachment, but he's not being forceful. He's not running for election. Mm-mm. So cowardice is the standard form here. And Kim, one of my most important thoughts all the way along about Trumpism is this. More than 1 million people died so that we could have this country. More than 1 million of them. The Civil War, every 40th person, and since they were almost all men, roughly every 20th person in the country who's male died over the Civil War, which was over slavery. If you went to school and were taught it had nothing to do with slavery, they lied to you. It's right in the documents of secession. And to not do the right thing because you might get voted out of office, that is an act of absolute cowardice. It is shameful. And we need to recognize these people who just can't stand up to Donald Trump because they'll get run out.
I think about that a lot, and I think about the oath of office and the oath that all the Congress people have to take along with members of the military and the president, which I know that oath is a little bit different. But you preserve and protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And we have a candidate here that has no use for the Constitution, it would seem. I guess where I get caught up in this is how people can call themselves patriots and wear flag t-shirts and wave the American flag when it's clear they're supporting a candidate who doesn't believe the basic tenets of what the country was founded on.
Right. Well, Donald has no idea what's in the Constitution. I mean, he made the assertion, I have an Article 2 that lets me do whatever I want. Article 2 is like 450 words long. You can go read it. It doesn't say anything like that. It says the duty of the president is to faithfully execute the laws and to be the commander in chief. And there are a lot of people in this country who call themselves patriots whose behavior has nothing to do with patriotism, just as there are a lot of people in this country who call themselves Christians, but they don't turn the other cheek. Mm-hmm. They don't welcome the stranger. They preach hatred, anger, taking from the poor, not sacrificing for the poor. And this is one of the most problematic issues in America, and it's not a new issue. From the beginning, when we had Calvinists in the early days of British colonial America, this idea that if you have money, it's the sign that God has put his grace upon you, has been troubling for this country. It's been used to justify owning other human beings. And one of the things I teach my students in the law classes is that New World slavery has nothing to do with the slavery of the ancient world that's mentioned in the Bible, etc. People in the ancient world had rights. People volunteered to become slaves because it got them fed, clothed, and housed. Many of the people who ran businesses for the well-to-do in the ancient world were slaves. In New World slavery, you can beat, rape, murder your people because it's not rape or murder, because they're not human beings under the law. Mm-mm. And religion allowed this. It was pastors here in England, though they got run off quicker in England, who sold this notion without seeing the difference between the old world slavery and what was on in the New World. And, John Kenneth Galbraith, the great economist, supposedly once said that modern American conservatism is an effort to justify oppressing the poor. I mean, I don't have his words quite right, but that's the general gist of his argument. And I think there's a fair amount of truth to that. We're always going to have people who dislike equality, whether it's gender, racial, LGBTQ. They're just not going to like it.
Sure.
And that's fine. We can have a diverse idea about that. But we are not going to, I don't believe the majority of American people believe in what Donald Trump is pushing, which is we should have a dictator, we should have a theocracy. We're going to force Christianity on everybody, whether you're a believer of a specific version of Christianity, you're Jewish, you're Muslim, you're Zoroastrian, you're an agnostic, you're an atheist. But Donald has created this aura of invincibility, and it just got taken away from you.
What's really interesting, and you mentioned religion, is that it doesn't seem to me that former President Trump spends a lot of time in church. But as we have Mindy talking about, Trump wants Project 2025, which is, from what I understand, part of this includes doing away with the separation of church and state, bringing religion into public schools, all of these things. Is this something, we talked a little bit about how the GOP will be, going after Kamala Harris. Is the Project 2025 issue something that Democrats should be hammering home when it comes to attacking the other side?
Yes, but they have to do it with some skill, because Donald is now saying, and notice the contradiction in this, I have no idea what's in it, never read it, but there are parts of it I like, and there are parts of it I don't like. Well, I'm sorry, how do you know what you like and don't like if you haven't read it?
You haven't read it, exactly.
When Project 2025 started, Donald Trump showed up and said, these are my people, they're going to write our plan, you're going to know what we're going to do when I return to the White House. And now he wants to run away from it. And of course he does, because Dobbs, the first ever U.S. Supreme Court decision that took a right away from American people, Roe v. Wade, that decision is incredibly unpopular. And it's unpopular with lots of conservatives who see it as the government, being much too involved. There's the old line about the conservatives want a government that's so small they can force it into your vagina.
Oh, no, thank you.
Right. But in Project 2025 also defines a family as essentially being a heterosexual married couple with children. Well, I'm sorry, I can't tell you how many people I know who are heterosexual, married, and don't have kids. Either they don't want to have them, they're infertile, or they're old. Right. It also proposes, in a subtle way that you could miss if you don't know the law, effectively making all contraception illegal: condoms, IUDs, birth control pills. And here's how it would do that. It says that no contraceptive can be shipped by what's called common carrier. So let's assume I was a David Cay Johnston IUD manufacturer. Mm-hmm. As long as I have my own fleet of trucks and only ship in my trucks, I can sell my IUDs, send them to each doctor's office. But I can't call up Schneider or one of the other big trucking companies and say, I need a tenth of a truckload or a quarter truckload for my boxes. Come by and pick up my boxes and move them. That's a common carrier. And people aren't going to catch this detail of what matters. So to prosecute this, somebody like Kamala is going to understand how to make this work. And by the way, banning contraception, I'm 75 years old, not a big deal in my life, but I don't understand how anybody under 50 would be in favor of banning contraception unless you're, one of the small segment of society who doesn't believe in birth control. And that's a very small segment of our society.
Right. Yeah. That would be used to control women. Something else that Vilma says age has finally caught up to Trump in comparison to Kamala Harris. Is it wise for Democrats to flip the tables with age and use that against Trump?
I think so. And we'll see what the professionals are telling pretty quickly by how they frame this. But yeah, Donald is now the oldest person running for president of the United States. He is 78 years old. He's not in good health. He claims to weigh less than I do, and he's 3 inches taller than me. I mean, Donald weighs 235 pounds. I'm George Clooney.
Yeah.
And I think this can be used very effectively, particularly when Donald is on the campaign trail and he goes into gibberish. Listeners and viewers, you can go to Google searches and put in Trump and gibberish and rally, and you'll find in some places compilations where Donald is going along talking like I am, like this, and seeming to make sense when
Yeah, he's got some issues.
Mm-hmm. And he'll go on for 25 seconds that way.
Yep.
There's something amiss, and I don't know if it's his misuse of drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, or age or something else, but it's hard for him to make the argument that he's all there that he was making against Joe Biden. I mean, Donald has charisma. Let's acknowledge Donald has charisma. Joe Biden didn't. He didn't have any charisma, never has. Kamala Harris, she's got it. She's exciting people.
She does seem to be exciting. The Rocket says, you can see the whole Trump follower operation malfunctioning since Joe Biden dropped out. It's super obvious. It does seem to have thrown a wrench into the whole, smooth Republican operation.
Yeah, this is a whole new ball game, a completely new ball game. Now you're going to see various coded attacks that are racist. We've already seen several prominent Republicans say that Kamala Harris was a DEI hire, affirmative action hire. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, she's never lost a campaign she was in. She's won every single election she was in. And my understanding from some people I've talked to in the past is that as a manager, at least at the California Attorney General's office, she was a pretty good manager. She knew how to, that's the president. Job of the president of the United States is manage, right? This is important. We're going to deal with it. This you got to shove off to somebody else. This I don't have time for it all. Let's do this. Let's not do that. What is possible? Can we get the coalition to do this? You have to make decisions like that all day long.
Right.
And she apparently has a pretty good track record of that. We'll see pretty soon. I mean, if she is a fraud like Donald, and it's all appearance, that'll come out real quick. I don't expect it will. So, and she knows how to do them. Donald has no capacity, Kim, to laugh at himself.
Right.
There's a very few videos where you'll see Donald laugh, and it's just forced. It's almost like watching a hostage video. And Kamala, I think, will demonstrate that she can get under his skin. Mm-hmm. And if you can mock him and get under his skin, because inside he's this hollow vessel, he tries to pose as a strong man, but he's a frightened 13-year-old boy inside who's been reliving the nightmare version of Groundhog Day for 60 years. She can probably make him do some nutty things. When I was covering Daryl Gates, the LA police chief, if I wanted him to get off his game and say nutty things, I would come to some gathering he was going to be at, and I would wear a white cotton suit with white shoes and a pink shirt with a pink and teal tie and a Panama hat with a pink hat band. And it would just make him go crazy. He would just, say the craziest things because you're not in control of everything about you, right? Some of nature is built into who you are. And Donald, if you get under his skin and mock him, he just loses it. Yeah. He may not lose it in the moment, but do it early enough and often enough, he'll have a very hard time. I also expect that we will not get through this without some violence because this will have a reaction on the side of people who love Donald and who hate minority people and hate women. I hope the Secret Service is very seriously protecting both candidates, doing a much better job than this screw up they had in Pennsylvania.
I was reading this article in the Huffington Post about who Trump fears most as a running mate for Kamala Harris. And the author of a book called American Carnage, his name is Tim Alberta. He says they are Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona and Governor Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, because he says, Mr. Alberta, both of these gentlemen are able to potentially put into play battleground states that the Trump folks were confident that they had already taken off the map.
Yeah, I also think that this is true of Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan,
who has said she won't be a vice president to Kamala Harris, but has endorsed her. Yeah,
she pulled herself off of this, but she could be the same thing. Mark Kelly is probably the stronger choice of those two, but I've never interviewed anybody in my life, and politics is not my game. So let's be clear: I've not been out on the road except once with a campaign, and then not for very long because I didn't like it. But I've never talked to anybody in my life who said their choice for who they voted for president was based on the vice president. Mm-hmm. What you can do is make a mistake. John McCain's people didn't vet Sarah Palin. They had no idea that she was ignorant and dumb, and it turned out very good evidence that nothing happened to her. She was utterly corrupt. The late, great Wayne Barrett, who was the first journalist who got on Donald, called up contractors who worked on her home and asked them if they had any invoices. And the first three of them said no. And then everybody by then got a phone call back and forth, and nobody would talk to him. But how did, on the modest income of the Palin family, did they afford this very expensive home built by the same contractors who put up the $22 billion Wasilla Community Center? I mean, they didn't check her out, and it became disastrous for them, damaging. And I don't think you will see Harris make this mistake. When you vet somebody for a job like this, one of the things you do is check out their background. And the second thing is you really grill them in private to the point they can be feeling like you're under attack and it's insulting, but to make sure there isn't something buried. Because, you don't want to pick a U.S. senator or a governor to be vice president on a family values ticket and have what happened that eventually got Barack Obama to the White House. And that was, he was allowed to run for the U.S. Senate in Illinois in 2006 because the Democrats were sure they would lose. A guy named Jack Ryan, a rich Republican family values candidate, was going to win. And then it turned out that he had tried to get his wife, the actress Jerry Ryan, to have sex in front of him at sex clubs. Mm-hmm. That was the end of Jack Ryan as a candidate, and Barack Obama eventually went to the White House. So every time you see 7 of 9 on TV or whatever role Jerry Ryan is playing, just always remember. But for her, Barack Obama would never have gotten to the White House.
Wow. You have on DC Report, not you personally, another journalist has written it, Terry Schwadron, an article called Trump's Bullet for Democracy. And I know I'm over my David Cay Johnston time, but I wanted to ask you about this.
I haven't read it yet. I saw it. I was doing local radio at noon today about my appointment as a professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Job will start next month. Terry Schwadron, for 18 years, was one of the best editors at the LA Times, and for the next 18 years, one of the best at the New York Times. He is one of the finest editors I've ever known in my life. He asked me once to go do a story, and I looked at him. I said, "Really?" And he said, "I want you to go do this." And because of my respect for him, I didn't argue with him. I just went and did it. It turned out to be one of the best things I ever did in my life. He has exquisite news judgment. He should have been on the masthead of the New York Times, but he wasn't. He was a very senior editor, but he wasn't on the masthead.
It's at dcreport.org, and the article is called Trump's Bullet for Democracy. And it goes on, it starts with what Trump said. He's at a rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which was, "Last week, I took a bullet for democracy." And he goes on to talk about, Mr. Schwadron, what does that near miss have to do with Trump protecting democracy? And it's just a really good article. So I would ask anyone to go check it out. this
Okay,
assassination attempt and what it means for the Republicans going forward. Yeah, there's the article right there.
what happened to Donald is absolutely indefensible. It's full of irony. The young man who shot him is a registered Republican, and we don't know why he did it.
Mm-hmm.
But let me point this out. Donald has this huge bandage on his ear, right?
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of people who showed up wearing bandages as a sign of solidarity.
So ridiculous, yeah.
Well, according to Eric Trump, there were no stitches. Not a one. I had a surgery for skin cancer Monday a week ago, 8 days ago. Or no, I guess 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry, Monday 2 weeks ago. And the bandage that was on my ear, you might not notice if I'd worn, I may have even worn it on the show 2 weeks ago. But you could miss it very easily. And I had 9 stitches. So what Donald did here in that level is very clear. He exploited this. He tried to make it look like it was a really big deal. And his exploitation is crude. For example, he went at the Republican convention where he was supposed to speak 3,000 words, and he spoke 12. And he went over and kissed the fireman's coat. I don't know if you noticed this, but the fireman's coat from Buffalo Township, his name is misspelled on the coat. Joe Biden immediately called the widow of Comparatori and the families of the other 2 people who were shot but not killed. Trump didn't do that until after lots of news reports pointed out he hadn't done that. That's not surprising. I mean, Donald claims hundreds of my friends died when 9/11 happened. Really? How many funerals did you go to? 0. When he had to call the family of Sergeant David Johnson, who was one of the 4 American Army members killed in Niger in an ambush, he insulted the widow. He has insulted Gold Star families. He doesn't know how to do it. I mean, I've had to tell people, the youngest when I was either 19 or 20, about a murder that they had, a kid murdered or a spouse, and other people about death. And Donald not only doesn't know how to do it, but he has no empathy for anyone. And the way he's handled the attempt on his life, the same thing. He has no empathy for other people. So I hope some people look at DC Report. It should go up this evening, East Coast time, early evening, West Coast time, so you can see it tomorrow. And it's a whole new ballgame, Kim. It's a completely new ballgame. I think the cash spigots are going to stay open, and lots of women are excited now about the prospect that we'll have Kamala Harris in the White House. I think she'd be a good president. I don't think she'd be a great president, but compared to Donald, I'll take almost anybody compared to Donald.
No, I've heard a lot of people say...
Yeah, he's announced that he intends to become our dictator, and if you think he's going to give that up after one day, I got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you.
I've heard a lot of people say to me personally, I feel hope and optimism for the first time in a long time.
Yeah. And because she can take the fight to him and hammer him in a way that even on his best days, Joe Biden just couldn't do that. Joe Biden, as a U.S. Senator for 30 years and as vice president, did deals in, leaning over the shoulders of each other and whispering in their ears, sitting down at a negotiating table, talking on the phone. He's fearless. He went during the Bosnia-Herzegovina War, as my best friend calls it, the Bosnia Schizophrenia War. He went and confronted one of the genocidal monsters, sat down across the table from him and as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, and nobody in the public knew he was there, and said, if you don't knock this off, murdering whole villages, killing the grandmothers and the little children, you're going to die in prison because we're going to arrest you and we're going to prosecute you at The Hague. Can you imagine Donald Trump having the courage to do something like that, or having the knowledge of what to say if he did that? it's just not possible because Donald literally doesn't know anything. So this campaign now, you have someone who has the skill Biden really doesn't have to reach out and excite people.
Yep.
And I think you're going to see. I think she'll win the popular vote. But Biden was going to win the popular vote. The question is, will she win the Electoral College?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a function of, do the Democrats put the money into getting people to the polls in the seven battleground states? I think there's 13 that really could be in play, but that's what they have to do. Don't spend money in California except for congressional districts. Don't spend money in Massachusetts, and Trump shouldn't spend money in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Those states are all going to go for him. Focus on the places like Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, where we're not sure how they're going to go. So
you mentioned, and I know I have to let you go, but you mentioned international politics, and it's been on my mind about Kamala Harris as to whether that's a strong suit of hers.
No, it's not. That's her area of weakness, and the answer to that is you have a strong Secretary of State and strong advisors, and they take care of this. And by the way, a little thing to remember about how to pronounce her name, which Trump and J.D. Vance keep mispronouncing, perhaps intentionally. Comma. La. There's a button with a comma and L.A. It's not Kamala.
No.
Not Camella.
I got it right? I mean, she's been a California fixture for a long time, so if I get it wrong, we're in trouble.
But you now got a national audience. I ran into another person who saw me on this show who's here in Rochester, New York, and they don't just watch what I'm on. So that's building awesome. A national audience, and that's really terrific. But people should get her name right, Kamala Harris.
That's right. David Cay Johnston, it is not only an honor, but an absolute treat for me to be able to talk with you on the Mark Thompson Show. Thank you for being here. Really looking forward to what you have to say next week. I can't wait to see you again. Thank you for coming by.
Take care. See you next week.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.